Some places exist that are more than just earth and stone. They possess a breath of their own, a spirit, often a spirit born of pain and forgotten anguish. Whenever the name Myrtles Plantation came up among America's most haunted places, what sprang to mind wasn't just the silhouette of moss-draped oaks and a grand southern mansion. It was also the cruelty of slavery, the coldness of murders, the burning fire of revenge, and the cries of lost innocences. The heavy, suffocating air that hangs over this place, much like the despair in the cells of Eastern State Penitentiary or the aggressive energy of the Sally House, was so palpable it could challenge one's sanity. After years of research and brief visits to other notorious spots, I finally made the decision to spend a night in the heart of these cursed grounds. Perhaps it was madness, but I couldn't resist the compelling urge within me. As I drove deeper into the Louisiana countryside, the thick, humid air, heavy with the scent of magnolias, damp earth, and decaying leaves, felt like stepping back in time, a complete break from the modern world. The ancient oaks lining the road, draped in Spanish moss, hung like colossal skeletons with arms reaching towards the sky, swaying not with the wind, but seemingly with their own slow, deliberate motion, giving a chilling sense of being watched. The heavy, muggy atmosphere of the land itself seemed to press down, filling me with an indescribable melancholy even before I reached the property. Finally, passing through the grand iron gate and driving down the long, winding driveway lined with those ancient oaks, Myrtles Plantation stood before me. Its white, classic southern architecture, wide veranda, and imposing columns were beautiful, yet the palpable weight of tragedy and sorrow that hung over it overshadowed its charm, rendering it breathtakingly unsettling. The last red rays of the setting sun reflected in the windows like bloodshot eyes, instilling a shiver before I even stepped inside. The moment the door opened and I stepped through, a sharp wave of cold air hit my face, a stark contrast to the dense humidity outside. This cold wasn't merely a drop in temperature. It was a bone-chilling ancient cold that penetrated deep, feeling damp and heavy as if the air itself had become dense with centuries of suffering. The lobby was grand but dimly lit, filled with antique furniture, old portraits whose eyes seemed to follow me, and heavy velvet curtains. It felt like a historical museum, yet this feeling was overlaid with an unsettling, heavy odor hanging in the air, a mixture of old wood and dust. Certainly. But beneath that, a strange, sickly sweet, unpleasant scent. It was like decaying flowers, perhaps the scent of the poisonous oleander from the garden, or worse, something putrid mingled with sweetness, a smell I'd only heard described in tales of places like Lizzie Borden's house or certain corners of Eastern State. The staff member who escorted me to my room offered a polite southern smile, but in their eyes, I saw not just exhaustion from a long day, but a weariness, an acceptance, a quiet dread of the unexplained occurrences that were routine within these walls. When I was handed the key, my hands trembled slightly. The key was for one of the most notorious rooms in the mansion, Room X, known as Chloe's room. My heart began to pound. The room itself, like the rest of the mansion, was both beautiful and profoundly disturbing. The antique bed, the wooden dresser, the fireplace, all possessed an elegant charm, yet they carried a palpable weight, a deep sadness. Distinct cold spots punctuated the air within the room, oddly sharp against the outside humidity. Left alone, I began to feel an intense sense of being watched. Fleeting movements flickered at the edge of my vision, but vanished when I turned. Looking out the windows, the shadows of the mossy oaks twisted and writhed in the growing darkness, taking on the shapes of living, lurking things. That evening, a guided tour delved deeper into the mansion's grim history and legends. Our guide, a masterful storyteller with a voice edged with mystery, recounted the tales of the plantation's various owners, the changing fortunes, the feuds over ownership, and the tragedies that unfolded since its founding in 1796. The heart of the dark history centered on the Woodruff family in the early 1800s and the enslaved people they held. The guide focused on Chloe, a slave girl said to always wear a green turban. In the brutal conditions of that era, driven by fear of punishment, after being caught eavesdropping and perhaps a desire for revenge, she allegedly baked a poisonous mixture made from the property's oleander flowers into a birthday cake for the family. Her intention was said to be merely to make them ill, a form of retaliation. But the outcome was far more tragic. Mrs. Woodruff and her 2 children died from the poison. The guide's voice dropped to a low, chilling tone as she finished. According to the stories, when the other enslaved people discovered what Chloe had done, fearing for the safety of their own families, they captured Chloe and hanged her from one of the large oaks right out there in the courtyard. It was believed that Chloe's ghost, still wearing her green turban, continued to wander the grounds in the mansion, particularly haunting the bedsides of sleeping visitors, sometimes seen braiding hair or simply watching. The guide didn't stop with Chloe. She spoke of other tragedies. Judge Clark, shot on the veranda in 1871, crawling back inside to die in the hallway, a spot where sudden coldness and sounds of a fall or groan are still reported. The famous mirror in the house was steeped in legend. Believed to hold the spirits of those who died within its walls, it was said to bear ghostly handprints that would reappear no matter how often it was cleaned. Looking at the mirror as the guide spoke, I did see faint, misty marks on the glass in the dim light, resembling handprints. Perhaps just dirt accumulated over decades, but at that moment, an inner voice whispered it was far more. The guide added that the ghosts of children who died on the property from illness or accidents were seen playing, laughing, or crying in different rooms. Even the specter of a Confederate soldier wounded in battle, who was hidden and later died here, was said to linger. When the tour concluded, true darkness had fallen outside. The silence that descended upon the mansion was different from the quiet of an empty building. It was alive, vibrating, listening. Most of the other guests had retired to their rooms, but I, caught between fear and an undeniable pull, began to explore the hushed, darkened corridors. My footsteps creaked on the old wooden floors, but at times I heard other footsteps too, seemingly beside me or upstairs, as if unseen entities were following me or retreating ahead. The subtle phenomena escalated. In my room, the cold spots became more distinct, moving and swirling around me. The feeling of being watched intensified, becoming a heavy, oppressive presence. As I tried to sit on the bed, I felt a pressure on the edge, as if someone unseen had just sat down beside me. Then the covers at the foot of the bed slowly, deliberately began to pull down. Not just a slight tug, but a steady pull as if by invisible hands. I sprang back, heart hammering against my ribs. "There's no one there," I whispered, desperate to cling to logic. But the cold, the pressure, the unmistakable movement of the covers screamed otherwise. Unable to stay in the room, I ventured out again. The desire to see more, to understand, warred with burgeoning terror. Approaching the main staircase, a wave of extreme cold hit me, making my breath visible in the air. It was a bone-deep, suffocating cold, worse than before. My chest tightened, making it hard to breathe. This must be the spot where Judge Clark fell. As I stood there, frozen, I heard the distinct sound of something heavy falling down the stairs above, followed by a sickening thud on the landing. A low moan echoed, filled with pain and despair. My eyes were fixed on the wooden steps. For a fleeting second, a dark, wet stain appeared on the wood, shimmering faintly in the gloom like fresh blood. Then it was gone, leaving only the old, dusty wood. Just as the sound faded, I felt a sudden, forceful push from behind, sending me stumbling forward, only managing to catch myself on the banister. Something unseen had tried to make me fall. My heart pounding, I stumbled downstairs. The lobby was barely lit, only by stray moonlight and faint light from outside. The sweet, unpleasant odor was overpowering here. The door to the main parlor was slightly ajar, and from inside came a low, unintelligible murmur, a hive of whispers, like a crowded room. I pushed the door open a little more and peered inside. The room was dark, but the sense of presence emanating from it was so strong, so dense, I held my breath. The whispers intensified, rising and falling. Different voices seemed to blend, male, female, even what sounded like children's voices. They were talking, conversing, but the words were just beyond comprehension, a maddening jumble. There was a tone of revelry mixed with underlying sorrow. It felt as if a spectral party, a gathering from the past, was still in full swing. Then the whispers abruptly ceased, replaced by a sudden, deep, heart-wrenching sigh that seemed to fill the entire room. I quickly pulled the door shut, my hand trembling on the doorknob, and backed away. Driven by a morbid fascination, I ventured further, towards the back of the mansion, near where the old kitchen and slave quarters would have been. The atmosphere here was different, heavier, more oppressive, infused with a deeper, more sorrowful kind of pain. The air felt thick, and the sweet odor gave way to a more stagnant, earthy smell. As I walked down the narrow corridor, I heard other footsteps accompanying my own soft padding sounds, like bare feet on wood. Then a thin grating sound, like metal scraping on stone, as if chains were being dragged. Turning the corner into a darker section, I saw it. A vague, smoky silhouette, standing in the middle of the narrow hallway. My heart leaped into my throat. It stood still, then slowly began to take shape, a dense, dark form. On its head, I thought I saw the distinct shape of a turban. Its form was indistinct, wavering, but it was there, and it was facing me. An intense cold radiated from it, making my teeth chatter. Then I heard a whisper right next to my ear, so soft it was barely there, yet utterly clear. "Get out." Followed by that cloying, sickening, sweet odor. The figure began to sway slowly back and forth as if hanging. In that moment, the guide's story of the hanging, the tragic end of Chloe, flashed through my mind. This wasn't just a residual echo. This felt like a conscious presence, filled with anger and sorrow. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot, paralysis seizing me. The figure swayed for a few more seconds, its form becoming more defined, the green turban clearer against the dark mass, before it abruptly dissipated, vanishing like smoke. It left behind only the crushing cold, the sickening odor, and a raw, primal terror that felt etched into my very soul. This wasn't like the passive echoes I'd expected. This was direct, powerful, and utterly terrifying. It was as if the house itself had manifested its most infamous tragedy just for me. My courage was completely shattered, but the thought of returning to my room, Chloe's room, felt impossible after what I had just witnessed. Instead, driven by a desperate, irrational need to understand, or maybe just confirm I wasn't insane, I sought out another notorious room, the mystery room, known for its particularly disturbing alleged activity. The door was slightly ajar, and a blast of intensely cold, foul-smelling air emanated from within. Stepping inside felt like stepping into an open wound of the past. The air was thick, heavy with despair and a smell like decay and sickness. The moment my foot crossed the threshold, a crushing wave of sorrow and agony hit me, so powerful I stumbled, nearly falling. The room was dark. My flashlight beam swept across it, illuminating peeling wallpaper and the outline of old furniture. In the corner stood a wooden rocking chair. As I watched, mesmerized by the overwhelming feeling in the room, the rocking chair began to move on its own, slowly at first, then picking up a rhythmic, eerie momentum, its creak echoing loudly in the silence. Then I started hearing the sounds, faint, guttural gasps, sounds of someone struggling to breathe, coming from the center of the room. They grew louder, more desperate. In the flashlight beam, in the middle of the room, a shimmering, distorted figure began to form. It was transparent, wavering, but I could see the shape of a human body, contorting, writhing. I could hear the gasping, the choking sounds clearly now. The figure's hands went to its throat, its head snapping back, eyes wide with terror and agony. It looked directly at me, its eyes hollow but filled with an unspeakable pain. In that moment, the air filled with that same metallic, stale smell I had associated with blood. This wasn't just a reflection. This was the raw, agonizing replay of a death, a soul trapped in its final moments. The figure writhed, gasped one last terrible sound, and then vanished as abruptly as it had appeared. The rocking chair stopped. The air in the room grew colder, thicker, heavier with the silence that followed. I stood trembling, gagging on the putrid air, completely broken. The rest of the night was a blur of terror. I didn't return to my room. I huddled in a corner of the lobby, flashlight clutched tight, flinching at every creak, every shadow. I heard footsteps pacing the corridors above me. Doors opening and closing down empty halls, whispers swirling around me that I couldn't decipher but felt were malevolent. I felt touches, like cold fingers brushing my hair or my arm. I saw fleeting shadows darting in the periphery, too quick to be real. The feeling of being watched was constant, overwhelming, like hundreds of invisible eyes were fixed on me, judging, waiting. Exhaustion warred with terror, making sleep impossible. I simply waited, praying for the sun to rise. When the first hints of dawn finally appeared through the windows, the oppressive atmosphere in the mansion began to recede. The chilling cold lessened, the sounds faded, the feeling of overwhelming dread began to lift, leaving behind only immense exhaustion and a profound, raw trauma. Downstairs at breakfast, I spoke hesitantly with some of the other guests. Almost everyone had experienced something: strange sounds, cold spots, doors opening, feelings of being watched. A couple shared a terrifying account of their door being violently shaken in the middle of the night. My experiences, while perhaps more intense, were not unique. Myrtles Plantation had shared its horrors with all of us who dared to stay. Leaving Myrtles Plantation as the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows through the moss-draped oaks, I looked back at the beautiful yet utterly horrifying white structure. It was no longer just a historical site or a collection of ghost stories. That night, within its walls, breathing that humid, magnolia-scented air, I had touched the heart of a living nightmare, a being forged from centuries of pain, tragedy, and unavenged rage. The terror, the cold, the whispers, the screams, the figures I had seen, they were now a part of me. The haunted breath of Myrtles had filled my lungs and settled deep within my soul. The door opened that night would never fully close for me. And sometimes, in the most unexpected moments, I still catch a whiff of that sweet, sickeningly putrid odor, or see a fleeting shadow at the edge of my vision. In those moments, I know that the shadow in the heart of Myrtles Plantation is still traveling with me. The history, the pain, the spirits, they weren't confined to that place. They had marked me as a witness, a carrier of their curse, a living testament to the horror that lingers when history refuses to die.